Hello and thank you for joining the Journal of Chinese Medicine today. I have the pleasure of being joined by Rob Helmer. Rob originally graduated from the Traditional Chinese Medicine School in Toronto in 1998 and completed his doctorate of Traditional Chinese Medicine at Pacific Rim College in Victoria. To obtain doctorate level knowledge, he learned to read medical Chinese and spent many years translating Chinese medical journals into English to share with others. He has completed clinical practice internships in China, Germany, and the USA. Rob is currently a professor of traditional Chinese medicine at Tcm in Toronto, and has previously taught at a number of schools in Canada and the US, and also developed and taught postgraduate courses on insomnia, asthma, and dermatology based on his own clinical experience and research. So Rob is a published author and has previously appeared in various TCM journals and published a book by Blue Poppy Press in 2006. Rob's presentation today is an introduction to the treatment of COVID-somnia and difficulty sleeping due to the pandemic. So Rob, thank you so much for being here today. I'd like to hand over to you now, please.
All right, so we have a lot to go through today and cover, and this is an introduction to traditional Chinese medicine and COVID-somnia, so using ancient wisdom to treat difficulty sleeping due to the pandemic. As mentioned by Charlene in the introduction, if you have questions, you can just pop in the word question and write it into the chat box, and I will browse through that as I go through, and I will stop if it's appropriate. If I know I'm going to cover something in the near future, then I won't stop. I might just table it to the end of the conversation. And just so you know that the Journal of Chinese Medicine has just published an article on this very subject that goes into great detail. So some people prefer to, to learn through reading, some prefer to by doing, some prefer webinars or courses, so that is available. And I would highly recommend that because it gives it it's a good reference point for you. So it's just being published like this week, I think. So you please go and find that on the Journal of Chinese Medicine. Imagine if you search the topic or my name, it will come up. Charlene will likely be able to help you with that as well. So every living organism on the planet needs sleep. So sleep is integral part of or component of human health. And it's an interesting thing. Why stop in take so much time out of your day to rest or to sleep? And so it is important to prevent illness and cultivate health in order to nourish our life and also our longevity. So this desire to sleep and being unable is one of the most frustrating experiences in our modern existence. And those who suffer from this affliction may stare up at the ceiling when they first go to bed and unable to fall asleep, or they might be able to fall asleep right away and wake many times in the night, or have restless sleep, or even wake up maybe in the early hours of the morning and can't get back to sleep. So there's a variety of different ways that sleep can be affected, or a combination thereof. Everyone's had occasional difficulty sleeping for one night. Sometimes we use the term, "Oh, I had terrible insomnia last night," because they didn't sleep well for one night. That's not really technically the diagnosis of insomnia. So chronic insomnia is if a person's having difficulty sleeping for a number of nights a week for several months, and this could be considered chronic insomnia. And the chronic insomnia, there's sleep deprivation that results from it, can disrupt a person's life and well-being. So it can affect, of course, your mood and your quality of life. And it really can become, it can turn sleep into a chore, like something that's difficult to do or challenging to do, instead of a relieving opportunity to rest and recover from your day. And sleep is known to help us deal with daily stresses, and it's very important to do this. But also stress, on the same hand, can cause chronic insomnia, especially in those who have a personal or family history of difficulty sleeping. So in sleep research, a lot of things they say, well, like, what is stressful in life? So problems or being dissatisfied with work, divorce or other marital or family difficulties, death of a loved one, major illness or injury, or crucial life changes. So the current pandemic is causing insomnia in over 50% of the population. Different research has shown this, and this is leading to increased stress levels and also medication use. I'm going to start here with a poem, and this, I really like this poem. I've used it for years. It's by Jalaluddin Rumi. We'll just kind of jump into it. So it's referred to as Elephant in the Dark. So some Hindus have an elephant to show. No one here has ever seen an elephant. They bring it in at night to a dark room. And then one by one, we go in the dark and come out saying how we experience the animal. One of us happens to touch the trunk, a water pipe kind of creature. Another, the ears, a very strong, always moving back and forth fan animal. Another, the leg. I find it still like a column on a temple. Another touches the curved back, a leathery throne. Another, the cleverest, feels the tusk, a round sword made of porcelain. He's proud of his description. So each of us touches one place and understands the whole in that way. The palm and the fingers, feeling in the dark, are how the senses explore the reality of the elephant. If each of us held a candle there, and if we went in together, we could see it. So this following presentation or introduction is a reflection of my clinical experience of diagnosing and treating the elephant of COVID Somnia that is bringing an increasing number of patients into our outpatient TCM clinics. So I'll explore with you the reality of this elephant by combining ancient wisdom with modern research to make suggestions to you of how you may help your patients who are seeking your support. So this journey from TCM student and textbooks, maybe the first time you're introduced to Chinese medicine, to being able to truly help patients presenting with complex, multi-pattern. In our patients, that's most commonly 4 to 8 simultaneously TCM patterns existing. And so this journey is long and it's challenging. To varying degrees, I've been on this journey for almost 25 years as a student, practitioner, teacher, mentor, and author of TCM. Sometimes I've been running, going very quickly, and sometimes I've become tired and I've needed to rest, but I've been on this journey for that long. And journeying with others. So I like to dedicate this particular talk to those who have entered the room before me and shared their experience of chronic disease with me, including my first teacher, Dr. David Lamb, Bob Flaws, and Mazen El-Kafahaji. And they have at various points over the past quarter century inspired me to continue the journey and to learn and share as they have. Particularly deep gratitude for Bob's past writings and teachings that influenced me. And I was fortunate enough around 1999, 2000, I was introduced through his teachings to different theories in TCM that I think are very, very useful and necessary to understand. And I'm going to share those with you guys today as well. And that's like Lu Wansu's theory of similar transformation, Zhu Danxi's 6 depressions, and Li Dongyan's Yin Fire. And I believe these are the bridge to help us understand and treat the modern patient. So my greatest hope for our time together is to open up further discussion on this subject and to offer a bit of a map, an introduction to a map that after this many years, I finally feel that or think that I put it together in a way that I can teach it easily. So I've mentored people, I've supervised people, and I've always been searching for a way to explain it. And I think hopefully through today, you'll see that I'm able to explain it through some diagrams, and I'm able to offer you a map that's more user-friendly that you can use. Not just for COVID-somnia, but I think for chronic disease in general. So we're going to go through an introduction and then talk about the secrets to success in the treatment of COVID-somnia, Chinese medicine and sleep, talk a bit about liver depression, qi stagnation, and stress and unfulfilled desires, and 4 main mechanisms of COVID-somnia, and the old theories applied to new diseases. And then introducing this new clinical framework. So in an introduction, it's what do I want to offer? What is the first building block that I would like to discuss? And I'll mention that after we have a bit of an introduction here. But in modern society, rates of insomnia and use of sleep medication have increased substantially over the years. Most medical sources, they say, what is the ideal amount of sleep for an adult that's over 18 years old? And you'll see 7 to 9 hours repeatedly. And in 2013, in a US Gallup poll, it showed that only 59% of Americans were achieving that. And this statistic was 84% 70 years earlier in 1942. The average person was below the minimum at 6.8 hours. And this was more than an hour less from the previous 70 years. So we're sleeping less. And 1 in 10 adults have chronic insomnia, according to the strictest criteria. But 1 in 3 people visiting a general physician were having difficulty sleeping. And I would argue that people that come to Chinese medicine prior to pandemic, maybe about 60% of people, 65% of people that came into my clinic would have difficulty sleeping as a symptom. And I would say now, like 95% of people that are coming into the clinic, at least the clinic that I'm in currently, have difficulty sleeping. And if we look at COVID patients, so when we're talking about COVID-somnia, this is due to the increased rates, like just a spike in rates of insomnia. The sleep specialists came up with this term COVID-somnia. So it's not necessarily that you've had COVID, but it's more due to the disruption of life, fear, isolation, that stresses the system and leads to people having difficulty sleeping. So this, of course, is an introduction to a larger course that's being offered through the Journal of Chinese Medicine, where we delve deeper into things. There is much research on this. You don't have to look very far. You look at trouble sleeping or mental emotional problems due to the pandemic, and there's so much research to go through. One study, researchers found that approximately 34% of COVID patients 6 months after diagnosis experienced at least one neurological and psychiatric outcome. And one of the most common was insomnia. This was 236,000 medical records. This was huge. And a third of them had a neurological or psychiatric outcome. And this incidence was found to be increased with infection severity and the need for hospitalization. So the worse the case, so to speak, of COVID, then the more likely that they were going to have these outcomes. And due to the stress and the length of the pandemic, due to as these cases of insomnia go from being more acute to chronic, even if the pandemic lifts like it is in Canada here, knock on wood, don't want to jinx it, but as it's moving out, certain of these, let's say a person's had trouble sleeping the last year, maybe a percentage of them will get better by themselves due to the change in the stress levels and so forth, and things returning to normal and the joy in life they're getting from reconnecting to others. But there'll be a good proportion that do not get better, and their insomnia has become chronic. They're out of their routine. Their sleep cycle's been thrown off, and they're going to be searching for help. So there's this kind of the crisis of the pandemic, but then there's what happens afterwards, you know, and there's mental health is a big part of that. So without a doubt, we're going to have people with anxiety, depression, sleep problems, searching for answers and help and assistance. And so my research in the last year has been focused on how do we prepare, how do we learn more, how do we gain more insights to help these people that are suffering. So different studies have shown it's over 50%, the American studies, Canadian studies, that their sleep has been severely disrupted. And in the one American study, it was 70% of those in the 35 to 40-year-old age range were having difficulty. And I think this makes up a good proportion of our patients that come into clinic. And the bad news here is these rates have yet to reach their peak and will outlive the pandemic. They've been studying social isolation and how it affects our mental, emotional health for many years, as we move from being villages and extended families to isolating ourselves and not having as large a family, maybe not marrying or having children, as many children, etc. And what they found is social isolation can severely affect our mental, emotional well-being. The one study showed, this was prior to COVID, they were studying all this, that if you were socially isolated for 10 days, that it had effect on our psychological well-being for up to 2 to 3 years later. That was only 10 days. So as we've been socially isolated and so forth, it does have an effect on our overall well-being. So it's not like a person had a vaccination or they've had COVID and they might not get COVID again. They don't need to. These are long-standing problems that will carry on past this. And I think we might be, in clinic 15 years from now and have a patient come in that has insomnia or depression or anxiety, and they said, "Oh, I've had this for 15 years." And as we do, we look into the history of these things. We would ask the person, when did it all start? And they very well might say, well, it started during the pandemic of COVID. And so yes, I feel certain that this will affect people for many years and generations, actually. Now, what is the secret to success in the treatment of COVID insomnia? It's very similar to any chronic disease. And these are kind of the 5 steps that, in my experience, I've come up with for you. So the first is to identify, discriminate, and diagnose all presenting patterns. Often in clinical practice, by traveling different parts of the world and working in different parts of the world with different students and practitioners, is oftentimes we will be able to diagnose patterns, but we stop. We might say, oh, we see this pattern, these 2 patterns, but we stop there and we don't go further looking for more patterns. Or we might be able to identify, 4 or 5 patterns, but we only treat 1 or 2 of them. So the first thing is to identify, discriminate, and diagnose all presenting patterns. So today, that'll be our focus, is this number 1. The course goes deeper into the following 4 here. So next, we would determine which pattern is or are predominant. And then we discern the proportions of each pattern in relation to the whole. So we could have 4 or 5 patterns going on. One of them is 35%, one of them is 25%, and then we have 15, 15, 10. Hopefully I did the math right there, to equal 100%. So that's what it would look like. It wouldn't be that all the patterns are 20% of the 5. It would be a proportion. And then we would discern the proportions of each pattern in relation to the whole. And this is based on symptoms, history, and/or tongue and pulse. And for myself, it could be just the number of symptoms a person has. It could be using the tongue and pulse to say what is most predominant. And then from there, once we know the proportions, then we should use a traditional herbal formula or acupuncture protocol to address predominant patterns, pattern and patterns and adapt the prescription in proportion to the existing pattern. So we might have a person with liver spleen disharmony, blood deficiency, and blood stasis. And so we might pick a prescription such as Xiaoyao Sun, and we might add Honghua and Tao Ren for the blood stasis aspect of it. So we would usually add in couplets, but if there's also phlegm or other patterns or heat, then we would adjust the formula based on that. But first, what's the predominant pattern? We pick a formula from that category, and then we adapt it for the remaining patterns. And then diagnosis is always a working diagnosis. So on follow-up visits, we need to adjust the protocol appropriately based on response to treatment. And the course really goes into the treatment, how to adjust things. This is, I feel Chinese medicine is an art. So as being an artist, you kind of have to adapt and go with the flow of what's happening in the clinic. So you could start to, clear heat, if that's depressive heat from qi not moving, but they're showing more spleen symptoms. Or you start to treat them and it's more spleen and they have more stress in their life and they're having more liver symptoms. So it doesn't mean you abandon the spleen to go treat the liver, just the proportion changes. And this is where the art of adapting the formula as we go along. So today we'll spend more time in number one, because you can't get to the rest without having the right diagnosis and discriminate. So we'll jump into looking a bit at sleep and wakefulness, just very simple, basic TCM. Mastery is mastery of the basics. So we start with basics and we build from there. So sleep and wakefulness is a yin yang pair. And I encourage you, there was through the Journal of Chinese Medicine, there was a webinar 2 weeks ago talking about tips for, and some of you have maybe heard this webinar or attended, and it has 20 different tips about different lifestyle things that you can do to prevent. And we go into depth about, from a modern point of view, about melatonin and cortisol, the suprachiasmatic nucleus, etc. We go into these different modern medicine and also Chinese medicine. So I do encourage you to, you can, through the Journal of Chinese Medicine on Demand, you'll be able to find that information. And there's handouts with about 300 articles on different research about, alcohol and sleep, sex and sleep, exercise and sleep, music, Tai Chi, massage. And so you'll be able to get this research. So here we're just going to briefly talk about this, but our focus today will be on the Tcm Theory. The course kind of puts everything together, but here we'll just give a basic introduction. So humans are conscious through their senses, and the mind is awake when the yang qi is sufficient and moves upwards. So this yang qi, or this qi in the body, is produced by our consumption of food and drink, and also combined with the air we breathe. So sleeping is a sinking of this yang qi back downwards and inwards to be enfolded and nurtured by yin. So this yang is able to sink back downwards because it's been expended by our daily activities, and it no longer we have enough to remain conscious and need to sleep. So we basically use up our qi. When we used up enough qi, we feel tired. The body shows us we feel tired and we need to sleep. So sleeping at night and during the most yin time of day, and being awake and active during the day, or when yang is at its highest, is a simple example of how light-related circadian rhythm is observed and applied in TCM. Now you will be receiving all of these slides. It'll be uploaded, if I'm not mistaken. You can ask Charlene as well. You can send her a message in the chat box if you like, or she'll let us know. But I think it will be uploaded to the website in your account that you're signed in for. And so there'll be an audio or video, I'm not sure which, and as well as these notes will be uploaded within the next week. So you'll have all of the slides so that you can just sit and relax and listen and contemplate what's being taught today without having to worry to scratch down notes. And at the end of the handouts and so forth that you'll receive, there'll be my contact information if you have questions afterwards as well. So sleep and wakefulness, going further. So during sleep, our yin blood nourishes us, heals, and recuperates the chi that we've used up during the day. So it's kind of recharging our batteries. And so after a restful sleep, our yang is recharged and we wake up back again, ready to meet the challenges and activities of the day before us. So healthy sleep should be sound, restful, and not disturbed by excessive or scary dreams. The fact our body's yang qi comes upward and outward around daybreak and retreats back downward and inward after the sun goes down is due to our body's qi being influenced by the larger qi of the external universe. And modern medicine knows this as well. You have your internal mechanism for regulating your system, but it's affected by the external. So the sun is called the Taiyang, or supreme yang in Chinese, and its rising each morning is seen as the growth of yang qi in the world at large. At noon, this yang qi reaches its extreme and begins to descend and retreat again. Therefore, the ruling qi of the day is yang, which grows from sun up to noon and declines from noon to sundown, while the ruling qi of the night is yin, which grows from sundown to midnight and declines from midnight to sunup. Thus, the body's yin and yang also follows suit. And the previous seminar talks about this in depth in relation to cortisol and melatonin and how that is basically follows this yin yang theory. So the heart stores the Shen, or I'll refer to it in English as spirit today, or spirit mind, and it's considered the emperor of the body mind. Spirit is nothing other than the accumulation of qi in the heart, which is constructed and nourished by blood and essence. Spirit is nothing other than the accumulation of qi in the heart, which is constructed and nourished by blood and essence. Li Dongyuan from the Jin Yuan dynasty said, "Qi is the forefather of spirit, and essence is the child of qi. Thus, qi is the root of both essence and spirit. Great is the qi. When qi accumulates, it produces essence. When essence accumulates, it renders the spirit wholesome." And Li Chan from the Ming dynasty said, "When a patient sees, hears, speaks, and acts absurdly, it is said to be due to the activity of evil spirits." This is the time in previous to this, it's, these demons or ghosts would enter the person because all of a sudden they would be acting strangely and they needed an explanation for it. So that was what they said. But Li Chan goes on further and says, "This is just qi and blood in extreme vacuity or deficiency, shu, causing the spirit mind insufficiency." So the Shen. Or else it is complicated by phlegm fire obstructing and dominating. So the spirit is confused and unsettled. It is not really the work of ghosts and demons. So you see here now pointing to pathological mechanisms that can cause imbalance in the body. So if this heart spirit becomes disquieted, we use this word disquiet, it should be quiet and calm. If it becomes disquieted, and this is either due to some type of malnourishment or harassment by pathological qi, it won't be able to sink down as it should, calmly and quietly. And then it'll cause the person to be able to not fall asleep possibly, or stay asleep a normal length of time. So this is the basic mechanism. So the three main organs that contribute to cobidsomnia and chronic insomnia in general are the heart, the liver, and the spleen. So although the heart is involved in all cases, its disturbance tends to be secondary, meaning it's only negatively affected after other organs have been diseased. So since it's the emperor, it's kind of protected. So other organs are affected first, and then eventually they lead to the heart pathology or imbalance that then causes the trouble sleeping or mental emotional problems. And what these three organs do is they lead to more than 4 simultaneously existing TCM patterns at the same time. So the 3 organs lead to imbalances that affect and cause many different patterns, and that's what we're going to touch in on today. So there's a book called Tcm Psychiatry by James Lake and Bob Flaws, and in it they identify 3 main mechanisms of spirit disturbance. So any mental, emotional imbalance or problems, according to TCM, can be broken down. So when I teach, internal medicine, or I teach TCM psychiatry in schools or to other people, it's really broken down into these 3 main mechanisms. So if a person has depression or anxiety or ADHD or premenstrual syndrome affecting the mental, emotional, or menopause, etc., or schizophrenia, it doesn't matter what it is, it will be broken down into these 3 categories. And of course, they can overlap where there can be 1, 2, or 3 of these all going on at the same time. So the first one is that heart spirit is not nourished or constructed. And the reason for this is either chi, blood, or essence deficiency. There could be harassment by heat evils. So this could be phlegm heat, replete, excess or replete heat, deficiency heat, damp heat. Some type of heat is affecting the spirit. And the third one is blockage and obstruction. So phlegm, turbidity, or blood stasis affecting the mind. Mental, emotional. So here we have our modern way of living, how we're living in this world, leads us to liver-spleen disharmony. What liver-spleen disharmony means 2 things are going on. There's chi stagnation in the liver, which referred to here as LDQS, which means liver depression chi stagnation, as well as the spleen being weak, spleen chi deficiency. And of course, the spleen chi deficiency and the liver chi stagnation can cause each other. The disharmony, lack of chi can lead to the chi not moving well. Then the liver overbearing on the spleen can affect its function. So they affect each other. But the way we're living, how we handle stress, our lack of exercise, our sedentary lifestyles, our jobs where we're sitting down, thinking and worrying about things over and over, these all lead, excessive sweets and fats and eating late at night, and all of these things lead to liver spleen disharmony. So if you've been practicing for a small amount of time or a long time, you will likely see that this is the root of all chronic disease. Then once these 2 mechanisms are in place, then it can lead to 6 depressions. We'll talk about that a little bit further. It can lead to the heat being accumulated in the body due to similar transformation. That's why many of our patients have heat as an aspect of their disease or imbalance. And then yin fire. Yin fire is a theory by Li Dongyun from the book The Pi Wei Lun, The Treatise of the Spleen and Stomach. It's a very useful theory. And a lot of what I talk about today will be based on that, but explained in a bit different way. So if we look at the 3 main mechanisms of mental emotional problems, and we add in our liver spleen disharmony, then this kind of gives us our 4 main mechanisms of COVID-somnia. But it also can be used for anxiety, depression, and a lot of chronic diseases, this model. So let's just look at this here. So the liver spleen disharmony means it opens up, and this is the model. So we're going to have this model, and I'm going to open it up, and then we're going to build on this model throughout today. And then if you take the course, we use this model to look at case studies and how we break things down. But it all starts from this model. So in the introductory talk, I'm giving you quite a bit of information that you can use in clinic already. And then it's kind of an introduction to it. And you could sit with this information for many, many years, as I have, 10 years and work with it and so forth. The course is really to go deeper, to be able to apply this to your patient and instantly start to get results in your practice by looking at how these different patterns join together with other patterns to create this complex clinical presentation. And then this guide map or way of looking or framework can be used to make these difficult things seem appear clearer to you, and therefore allow you to choose the right treatment and to get more results. So today we're looking at the framework and the diagnosis, and then we build on that to then start to talk about treatment in the course. Of course, you know, you only can do so much in 2 hours. So here, when this opens up, liver spleen disharmony, as you see open up in the upper left quadrant here, we have the spleen chi shu and the liver depression chi stagnation. Oops, here we go. Should open up here. And then we have malnourishment and non-construction. What do we mean by that? Remember, we talked about chi, blood, essence. So here it opens up, and on the right-hand side, so you have spleen chi shu at the top, and blood deficiency, yin deficiency, and deficiency heat on the right-hand side. So blood deficiency over time can lead to yin deficiency, and yin deficiency can lead to deficiency heat. And of course, there's a relationship between spleen chi and blood deficiency, and yin deficiency, etc. Then on the next one, excuse me, in the lower right quadrant, we have harassment by heat evils. So here in the red circle at the bottom, we have depressive heat. Or fire. We'll talk about that. It's the most common type of heat met with in clinical practice, in my experience, and the one that's least talked about. And then we have blood heat as well. And then lastly, we have a blockage and obstruction in the lower left quadrant. And what we have here is we're talking about the 6 depressions. So something's being blocked, whether it's food stagnation, phlegm, dampness, blood stasis. So we'll build on this. So this is our diagram opening up, and these are our main things that we're going to look for in clinic and how they interrelate to each other. So if we look at in the textbooks, whether it's the Flaws Lake textbook that I mentioned, which is very good for Tcm Psychiatry, or we look to a book such as the Clinical Handbook of Internal Medicine by Jane Littleton and Will McLean from Australia. And there's a couple other authors for the new version of that book. It used to be three books, and now they've combined it into one book. It's the book that I use when I teach internal medicine in schools. It's a very good book. You look at what are the TCM patterns of insomnia, and these are the main ones. So heart, spleen, dual deficiency, that means heart, blood, and spleen chi. Liver, blood, yin deficiency with deficiency heat. Non-interaction between the heart and kidneys. Heart, kidney, yin deficiency. Heart, gallbladder, chi deficiency or timidity. It's different ways of saying that. Phlegm, fire. Liver chi stagnation with depressive heat or fire, heart fire, blood stasis, food stagnation, and retained heat. This retained heat is from they've had a febrile condition and they've had insomnia since then. So you would treat it based on the level where the heat is retained in the body. In Taiwan, they have a lot of research of database of research, because the people there, the government pays, according to what I've been told, they pay for their prescriptions of herbs, and that's why they use extract powders. They pay for them, but they collect a database, and they use a lot of classical formulas of what formulas. So for instance, you can look up asthma, and it's like there was 12,000 cases over this 5-year period. This is what these were the top 3 herbal formulas used, and you can find this research online. And you know, this was the diagnosis. So for insomnia, they do the same, and the main 5 that made up the majority of cases were the following. So heart, spleen, deficiency made up about 25% of cases. So that's a heart, blood, spleen-Qi deficiency. So as herbalists, the guiding prescription here would be Gui Pi Tong, for instance. The next would be this heart, kidney, yin deficiency. There you have Tian Wang Bushan Dan. Phlegm fire, you might be thinking of like a Wendong Tong. Oops, lost my ability to write here. But you see phlegm fire there. Let's see if I can get my, oh. Let's try this again here. There we go. Phlegm fire here, and liver qi stagnation. But this liver qi stagnation is with heat. So liver qi not moving, causing a heat, and then that's the pattern. And then lastly is this heart, gallbladder, qi deficiency. I did talk about this, I believe, 2 weeks ago in introductory. So people tend to wake up in a fright, they startle easily. They could have been born this way, or something traumatic or stressful happened to them earlier in life, and they present with this pattern. We talk about case studies in the course that have this pattern. It's more common than you think, so to be able to identify and treat it. So those are the 5 main. So we have 12 or so, and then these are the 5 main that present in clinic, and then we need to know how to treat these. So this could be the main pattern, but what this course is in the introductory today is say, well, how can these, when we have heart, blood, and spleen Qi deficiency, how can, that's not going to just end at those 2 patterns. Because they have those 2 things, they likely have 2 or 3 other patterns going on. And how do we adapt this main formula or this main diagnosis to treat in all the patterns and have more success in treatment? So that's really what I'm offering here. And for some of you, you might have just be getting going, or you're students of TCM. So this might not make a lot of sense to you, but I'm hoping that me introducing this, I know that when I was introduced different theories by Bob and others, what happened was I was like, yes, I was relieved. I'm like, that's what I'm seeing in clinical practice. Initially, I got out and the certain textbook were like, it's either this pattern or this pattern. And I would start to treat this pattern and that would get better, but then the other pattern would get worse. And I'd say, no, it's this other pattern. And I'd go over here. And I think that in order to create a frustration where the patient never got completely better. And so then I started just searching for other ways of seeing it, and how do we treat this all at the same time so the person completely gets better. And that's what I've been attempting to do for 25 years, and also to teach as well. So when I heard someone else witnessing and seeing what I was seeing in clinic, I was relieved. And I'm hoping I can offer some of these teachings that will be the same for yourself. You might go back to clinic and say, oh, this person has liver qi stagnation, I'm going to check for blood stasis. And then you check for blood stasis, and oh, they also have blood stasis. So you start to go deeper instead of simplifying it. And when you're met with a pattern and the liver qi not moving is very obvious, so that's what it is. And many people will talk about peeling the onion, the layers of the disease away. For me, this doesn't work for patients. What works is to treat it all at the same time. That's what works. And that's what has more staying power and completely heals quicker and at more of a depth. Not peeling little bits by little bits, but going right through the center and treating it all at the same time. So let's look at the liver's function according to TCM. So whenever the liver is out of balance, it can affect our emotional state, our digestion, and menstruation in women. So we look for these 3 things. There's different statements of fact about the liver, and this will of course be in your notes, and you guys know this, but the main one we're going to look at today is the coursing and discharging. So this is the movement of energy in the body, the spreading of it. So the effects of stress have been noted in Chinese medical literature for over 2 millennia. So there's been effective ways of diagnosing, treating, and preventing health problems associated with stress. There's also a long history of diagnosing and treating disease resulting from the stress and fear caused by epidemics. So in ancient times, epidemics have been a central topic in Chinese medicine thoughts. And according to Dr. John Chen, there have been over 320 large-scale epidemics in Chinese history, in the last 2,000 years. So one of the fundamental differences, of course, of TCM and modern medicine is the belief in energy. So there needs to be enough energy, and the energy needs to be flowing freely. This is what needs to happen for a person to be healthy, physical, psychologically. But if it isn't, then this also can prevent them from healing. So you can look at it this way, that the main function of the liver is to be able to help the body to adjust and adapt to change. So both environmental and physiological, by maintaining the free flow or coursing and discharge of qi in the blood. So if you can go with the flow, if you could go with the flow during the epidemic and the different changes in society and lockdowns and so forth, then your liver qi is moving better. If you're very fixated and stuck on certain things and these changes affect you more, then the liver is likely at play and needs to be addressed, but it will show up as symptoms. Why do we say this word depression? Well, this is a Wiseman and Feng Yi term from the dictionary, Practical Dictionary of Chinese Medicine. And this word yu means depression, stagnation, reduce activity. Some people translate it as constraint as well. All of those words like depression, constraint are good words because they're different than stagnation. Stagnation is a totally different Chinese character. So there has to be some way of differentiating it. But even though they can mean similar things, what this is its code for liver depression. Qi stagnation means qi stagnation due to mental emotional reasons. So the cause of the qi stagnation is emotional. All right. So there's the 5 main causes of illness in Chinese medicine, such as, from our constitution to our diet, to the external environment, etc. So emotions is a very big component. If the qi stagnation is caused by the emotions, then the word, there's a lot of code words in Chinese medicine that have deep meaning, and this is one of them: liver depression, qi stagnation. So some English sources drop the word completely. They don't translate it at all. So you then lose the meaning. So if you had a injury from an external traumatic injury to your arm, and you had qi stagnation and blood stasis due to the injury, you would call it qi stagnation and blood stasis. But if you're having, a sore neck from or pain and the stiffness in the neck due to emotions, then that's liver depression, qi stagnation. They're different, and that means different herbs, different treatments as well. So it's really important, basically, I would say. So we'll call it liver depression, qi stagnation. Doesn't mean they're depressed. It means the energy dynamic is depressed, but they could have depression as well. So stress equals unfulfilled desires. Is the speed okay? Just waking up here in Canada. Someone's joining from Calgary, so they're even waking up. Right. Anyone else? Sometimes I get excited. I start talking quicker, but then I forget that even though it might not be new for me, it's new for others. Okay. It's like when someone asks you your phone number and you say it very quickly because you know your phone number, but they don't, or how to spell your last name or something, and you say it very quickly. It's the same thing. Okay. All right. So stress equals unfulfilled desires. So this is an entry point for me to talk to patients about their health. So oftentimes stress is wearing them down, and it's showing up as the liver qi not moving well in the body. So I explained to them that stress equals unfulfilled desires according to TCM. And everyone has unfulfilled desires as an adult, as we'll talk about. So people can relate to this. It could be they're in a relationship they don't like, or work, or difficulty at home with their children, or financial problems. They want to pay, they want to be able to afford their rent and mortgage, but due to COVID, There's been loss of jobs. There's many different unfulfilled desires. They want to get to work on time, but they can't find their keys. It could be something small or large. Or they could have been abused when they were younger. They didn't want to be abused. They could want to sleep at night, but they can't get to sleep. Or they're in pain all the time. They don't want to be in pain. So you can see how all these unfulfilled desires. With the pandemic, people have experienced more unfulfilled desires than usual. And this has led to an extraordinary global impact due to the shifts of our daily lives, feelings of loneliness, job losses, lack of physical exercise, being isolated from family and friends, financial difficulty, and grief over the death of loved ones. Another consequence during this time has been the unusual amount of time together in confined spaces without respite. So, and this is due not to our choice, but being, forced to. It's like in Canada now, we're coming out of a long lockdown. So we've been with less people in more confined spaces than we ever have in our lives. And this has led to more domestic violence, more conflict. Which has led to more separations and divorce. And the separation and divorce is also a trigger for the development of other mental health problems, including depression, anxiety, and trouble sleeping. So the stress causes situations and consequences that cause more stress. And then as human beings, we are social beings. No matter, I'm can be social, but I'm more of a hermit in a lot of ways. But humans, at some level, some degree, desire social connections. So if this desire to connect is not met due to these restrictions, then mental health problems can be triggered by this prolonged social isolation. I mentioned that research earlier. So in the past and in traditional cultures, all any adult needed at any one time was food, clothing, and shelter. So beyond the basics of life, everything else is based at a desire. So there's never a time when a desire must be fulfilled. And when these desires go unfulfilled from that individual's perspective, this causes a person to become stressed. So for instance, if you don't want to, like in clinic in Canada, we have to scrub everything down between each patient, door handles and beds and wherever the person sat, etc. So for me, it's like, well, I'm able to work still, so I'm just going to do it. It's not stressful for me. It takes a little bit more time, but it's not so stressful. If another person didn't believe in what was happening with COVID, etc., then they would become possibly stressed by it. It's like, why do I have to do this? This isn't necessary. This is being blown out of proportion. And so that person could be stressed, and another individual having to do the same thing might not be stressed. So it's all about perspective or perceived stress that you're having. So if you grew up and your family were fishermen or fisher people, and you were gonna fish for your life, there wasn't choice, and that was just the way it is, and you kind of accepted it. Versus now with the internet and TV, etc., introduction into these societies that didn't grow up with it, what happens is they start to see what other people have, and then they desire more because they think things can and will be different than they are. So desiring more than they have. And this, of course, is made worse if you don't know how to handle stress. So what happens is the stress causes the chi in the body not to move. We tense up, we hold our breath. And if we don't know how to handle stress in a healthy way, then it makes it worse. So what are different ways that can promote the flow of energy in the body? Physical activity, social connection with loving relationships, relaxation, meditation, singing, chanting, laughing, positive outlook on life, including gratitude, finding meaning or purpose in life. These are all things that can move the chi in the body in healthy ways. We talked more about that 2 weeks ago in the webinar about different things we can do. So a statement of fact in Chinese medicine is the liver is the temperamental organ. And this means it's typically the first organ negatively affected by mental emotional stress. And it's particularly susceptible to thwarting of one's desires. I just did a talk a couple weeks ago for the Register of Chinese Herbal Medicine in England. And I talked 2 hours on this aspect of cortisol and liver depression, chi stagnation, and going deeper into this. So today we're just going over it to talk about its importance, but we also have to move on because we have other things to talk about. So if the liver's function is negatively affected by frustration, suppressed emotion, or stress, and stress, once again, is basically you desiring to do more than one can in any given situation. That's stress. You want to, you don't like this, you want to do more, but you can't, and that produces stress in the body. And this affects that liver's function of moving freely, the chi. And to be an adult, you need to delay gratification. So this is common. This is why this delayed gratification, to be an adult, you have to have unfulfilled desires. So, and no one can fill all their desires in the moment they have them. Therefore, liver depression, chi stagnation is common in our patients. And even if it isn't the cause of the problem, it's the result. So if a person wants to feel healthy, but they're not, then that can lead to liver depression, chi stagnation. So it might not be the cause, but it's the effect. A good example of this is infertility. So a person wants to get pregnant, but they cannot. This can become stressful. And many of these patients, what's actually happening is they're causing, to solve a problem, they're causing a problem. So they're getting more focused and fixated and stressed about it. And that's making things worse, not better. And very often you'll say, oh, this person, I've witnessed it in clinic, they give up about getting pregnant. I remember a couple that came to me, and he actually had something genetic with his sperm, and then it would cause her to have miscarriage. And so all sorts of things were done, including both coming to see me. And then they decided that they were going to adopt, and then they adopted, and they relaxed about it. And this person stopped work and was doing yoga and walking every day, and very fixated, but also doing all the right things. Couldn't get pregnant, and then they adopted, and once they adopted, they were pregnant right away, and then they ended up having 2 boys within a year of each other. So this relaxation can't be underemphasized. We'll talk a little bit more about that. So the body can also be stressed by changing the rhythm of what is, and there's some quotes here that you can read through, but basically if we're staying up late at night and doing yang things, busy things with our mind, or exercising late, or this can throw off the natural yin yang rhythm of when we should sleep and so forth. And these little things over time can stress out the system. The body is set up, the circadian rhythm of the body is set up in such a way that our body can anticipate when we're going to wake up, when we're going to go to sleep. And if we can anticipate it, then it takes less energy of our body, right? It's moving with the natural motion of the body. If we go against that, then it can stress the system out. So here's a quote from Will McLean that you can read through. So when we have this liver chi stagnating in the body and not moving, what can happen is it can build up this pressure in the body. And if people are unable to cope with the stress, then they'll often unconsciously or consciously try to relieve this buildup of pressure by self-medicating. And so this pressure builds up, they'll do stuff to help relieve the pressure. That could be different addictions, whether that's addictions to shopping, pornography, cigarettes, nicotine, alcohol, drugs, anything that can move the energy and make us feel good, at least temporarily. And if this pressure builds up too much and people can't handle the pressure, then it can lead to suicide. So addictions since the pandemic have went up. Also deaths due to addictions. Suicides have increased as well. And it's from a Chinese medicine perspective, it's from this pressure building up, and it wants to be relieved, and so the person will look for different ways to do it, and even using pharmaceuticals as well. Unfortunately, some of these self-treatments weaken the body. So what happens is the system gets weaker. We borrow from the essence of the body. And when the body gets weaker, then it's more easily stressed. When it's more easily stressed, then they go to the substance again, right, to relieve the stress. And over time, they need more of the substance to get relief of stress. And it weakens their body even further, puts it out of imbalance. And this is the addiction process. Many of these addictions are enemies of obtaining a restful night's sleep. For instance, nicotine, alcohol, coffee. These are all things, and you can go back to the seminar from a couple of weeks ago to understand those. Acupuncture is a great way to move the energy in the body. It's the thing that it does best. So it's a very good thing. You can also use acupressure as well. And also essential oils are something that I'm using more and more. Based on some research in China, I developed an essential oil blend that people can use. Some of my patients are using it in their masks, or you can put a couple drops on your pillow at night or in the infuser. And this blend of oils is known to help with sleep, anxiety, depression. And I think based on TCM, and it's got lavender, rose, frankincense, agar wood, sandalwood, sweet orange oil. So it's a blend of all these Chinese herbs that help move the qi in the body and help calm the mind. So it's been quite helpful for those that have used it. And I've had other practitioners. If you're interested, you can just contact me, and you can order. Order it. I can tell you where to order it from. So in modern society in general is built on having and wanting more, or thinking we deserve more immediately. I remember as a child, we would, if we needed something for the house or a car or something, it would be like, oh, we need a new sofa or Chesterfield or couch, whatever people from different countries would call it differently. Love seat. Then we'd be like, oh, we need a new one. Let's save for 6 months to purchase this. And now it's like we have credit cards and we buy things right away. It's like, oh, I'd like something, and it's like 2 hours, an hour later, it's like ordered on Amazon and it's showing up at your door the next day. And this immediate needing, wanting more, thinking we deserve more, is how many of us are living in or our patients are living in society as well. So by wanting more, you're going to have less fulfilled desires. It's going to create imbalance. So our lives have become more complex, and then our imbalances in the body become more complex, and we're likely to have this liver depression, qi stagnation. You throw in a pandemic, and the pandemic has restricted people's desires, sometimes for the first time in their life. And they're, so for instance, some of my patients here in Canada, they'll go south for the winter time. Maybe they're retired, so they'll spend, they'll get away from the Canadian winter for 5 months at a time. And now they're not able to do that. They dislike Canadian winters, they want to get away, and they're not able to. So that might be the first time that they've ever been told they can't do something that they want to do. So this can lead to qi stagnation. We'll see this come up as we age. We lose our ability to do certain things. And it can make us irritable or depressed as we get older because, oh, we're not able to drive, or we're not working anymore and we enjoy work or whatever, as we lose our ability. But the pandemic kind of thrust this upon us as a society. You're not allowed to go here. You're not allowed to do this. Or that's at least what people tell you. But because of the way we've grown up, I point to, we haven't learned resiliency. And I think through the pandemic, what happens is some people have gained resiliency and ability to cope. So if something came along later on that didn't severely affect them, then they'll be able to cope better because they've had the resiliency built through the pandemic. But prior to this, because we grew up many of us have not all of us, but most of us probably have grown up where there hasn't been a lot of war, or famine, or, high stressful situations for a number of years that have existed where we grew up. So because of that, we might not have as much resiliency or ability to cope. And so more people have been unable to manage these increased levels of stress. And this is why there's been dramatic increases in inability to sleep. It's inability to cope, in my opinion. So if the person is having this stress and it's affecting the liver's function of the qi not moving, then it can block the energy. And often it will show up as stagnant qi in the liver, gallbladder, meridian. So it could be here we have listed chest, rib side, breast, and abdominal distension and oppression, upper back, neck, shoulder tension, irregular or painful menstruation. It could be tendency to sigh because that's due to the chest oppression, Shangmen, right? It could lead to the emotions associated with the qi not moving, irritability or nu, easy anger, mental depression, dull affect, taciturnity. This is all due to the qi not moving. Could be a person having cold hands when stressed or nervous, alternating diarrhea and constipation, or pellets or loose stool. And some of these symptoms can just be made worse premenstrually. Could be headache, more of a lighter headache, but temple and forehead regions, and a wiry or bowstring pulse. It's the same, Xian Mai. So these are all common symptoms of liver depression, qi stagnation. So as we analyze and go through cases in the course, we break down cases. Does this exist? You don't have to have all these symptoms, but if you have a few of them, you have PMS, you have a wiry pulse, you're irritable, then you have liver depression, qi stagnation, at least as part of your overall pattern. Many of the textbooks out there and many practitioners I find kind of cloud and mix symptoms of different patterns, but a lot of my teachings are about get very clear on what is in each pattern. What exists? Does this person have this? Why do they have this pattern? Well, they have this pattern because they have X, Y, and Z. Okay. So we're looking for confirmation, just like a detective would look through evidence to say who's involved in the crime. We need evidence. We just cannot say, oh, liver depression, qi stagnation is common, pandemic, so they have it. No, you need to have evidence that they have it, and you need to search in the right place, I would say. So there's many reasons or causes or aggravation of liver depression, qi stagnation, not just unfulfilled desires, but if the blood is low, or the yin is low, or the yang is low, or the qi is low, these are all reasons that can also cause the liver qi not to move. We don't have time to discuss everything in depth, but so the pattern present in patients with COVID, this is a pattern that's present in people with COVID Somnia, but by itself, liver depression, qi stagnation, historically, and even in cases, will not present just by itself. So as the heart is secondary, the liver and the spleen are primary, but by themselves do not cause. Spleen qi deficiency by itself does not cause insomnia. Liver depression, qi stagnation by itself does not cause insomnia. So they're kind of present, but they're not the cause. Where the heart is secondary, so it's kind of this interesting thing. And so that's why the interplay between them is important to understand. So only if it's with other things. However, if you don't address the liver depression, qi stagnation, then your success in treatment will be low, in my opinion. So here you'll get charts. These are charts and things that I've developed just recently, actually, to explain things. Well, what I'm encouraging you to do, and I hope these diagrams or maps help you, and we're going to build on that. So we had the initial thing. So in the center here, just to explain this to you, we have 3 purple dots here. The first one here is FS, and that stands for food stagnation. And PD stands for phlegm, dampness. and BS stands for blood stasis, okay? And we'll talk about them later. Those are 4 of the 6 depressions. Depressive heat is number 5, and liver depression, chi stagnation is number 6. So that's your 6 depressions, all right? Here it's just in the diagram for a reason, when we'll explain why. So watch how this works here. All right. So if a person has liver depression, chi stagnation, it can lead to other imbalances in the body. So if we had more time, I'd be asking you guys to participate, but I'll just show you what's here. So watch how the lines join with each other. So the first line here is a green line going for liver depression, chi stagnation, the spleen, chi shu. We don't have time to delve into each of these, but you know through your theory that they can cause them. If you don't, then you can go back and look at, oh yes, this causes that, this causes this. So the first one is liver depression, chi stagnation can lead to the spleen chi being weak. Next line goes from liver depression, chi stagnation to food stagnation. So if we're stressed and we go to eat, it can cause food stagnation. The next one is liver depression, chi stagnation leading to phlegm dampness. When the chi moves, the fluids in the body move. And so the chi not moving can lead to phlegm dampness. So this is, if you have liver depression, chi stagnation, you should be checking for these 5 or 6 things that I'm going to mention here, right? You have the one, you need to see, has it progressed to the next one? And very often it has. The next one is going down to blood stasis. And then lastly, there's see that green circle line going down to depressive heat. So if the chi is not moving, it can lead to depressive heat. So we're not going to talk deeper about this, but it's just getting used to this model that when you have one of these circles, they can lead to other things. So let's go further into, due to time, we have to move on. Malnourishment and non-construction. Remember, we're starting back at that diamond and we're going around it. So we've just talked about one portion of it, and now we're moving around. Yes, so malnourishment, non-construction. In this case of COVID Somnia, we're talking about spleen chi deficiency and blood yin deficiency. So we're going to talk about those in detail. And like I said, in the course, we would be talking about what herbs, what acupuncture points, what formulas we would choose to address these different aspects. And we'll be talking about cases that have all 4 of that diamond, all 4 of them existing at the same time, and how to treat it. But now we're setting the foundation, building blocks of diagnosis and discriminating. So when we look at the textbook reasons for insomnia and COVID somnia, then you would have these 4 patterns represented in this category. So we have the 12, but they can broke down into these 4. So malnourishment and non-construction. So the main organs for this to nourish and construct the spirit are the heart and the spleen. So blood is a tangible substance that is born of unsubstantial chi. So if their chi is deficient, there'll be no strength to perform its engendering transformation function, and this can lead to the blood deficiency. If you look at what is the cause of blood deficiency, there's 2 causes in TCM textbooks. One is loss of blood, so you've lost blood, so that's why you're low in blood. And the second one is the spleen is weak. So in clinic, most commonly, if a person has blood deficiency, then it's because their spleen is weak. So these are 2 coexisting things. And oftentimes they could have chi deficiency of different organs, but if you have any chi deficiency in the body, whether it's long or hard, etc., then you almost always, I would say always in my experience, you also have spleen chi deficiency. So blood is the mother of chi, and hence when blood is deficient, chi is deprived of support, resulting in chi deficiency, and vice versa. So treatments either addressing either of these should support the other one. So when you're strengthening chi, we also nourish blood, and when we nourish blood, we also strengthen chi. So we do them both at the same time. So chi and blood deficiency, the heart being deprived of proper nourishment. Remember, the Shen is nourished by this heart chi and blood. So if it's not nourished, then it can be disturbed, and this can lead us to difficulty sleeping. So there's a quote from the Jingui Yaowei. It says all types of so it's looking back historically, theory that built on what I'm saying right now. So all types of scanty chi and blood are ascribed or home to the heart. If the heart becomes vacuous or shu deficient, people have lots of fears. When they close their eyes and desire to sleep, dreams move and scatter the essence spirit. Thus, the ethereal and corporeal souls move frenetically. So causes of spleen chi deficiency. So our fast-paced lifestyles of modern society with its prevailing dietary, recreational habits, stress, sedentary jobs, and over-reliance on medications all contribute to spleen chi deficiency. So as you see here, what we're eating, sugars, sweets, fats, oils, uncooked, chilled foods, too much physical activity, not enough physical activity can all harm. Iatrogenesis, which is wrong treatment by or imbalance caused by treatment, so too many antibiotics, for instance. Overthinking, worry, anxiety, all can cause the spleen chi to be deficient. And we may be partaking in not eating as well during the pandemic. We might be over worrying, having more anxiety, not exercising as much, and that can lead to it. Now, females have a tendency to have weaker spleens, and this is due to menstruation, childbirth, and breastfeeding. So they're losing this essence blood from the body, and their spleens need to work harder to make it up. So you'll see textbook signs and symptoms of spleen chi deficiency. Even though I've done research, I'm a clinician. So anything that I'm using or speaking about as a teacher, it has to make sense or work in clinical practice. So for instance, a sign of Wei Qi or defensive Qi deficiency could be spontaneous sweating. Now, I've asked thousands of people if they have spontaneous sweating outside of China, and it's not a symptom people relate to. So we want to come up with symptoms that people relate to, that show up in clinic, in our patients, in these complex patterns, so that we can diagnose it. These are the ones that Bob Floss taught me and I've used in clinic, and it seems to be very helpful or useful. So we have fatigue. So if a person is tired, they often have spleen chi deficiency. Cold hands and nose, tendency towards loose stool, loss of strength in the hands and feet, swollen tongue, abdominal distension, bloating after meals, orthostatic hypotension. So this is an important one to ask for. So dizziness on change of position, tendency towards low blood pressure, and bruising easily. So they bruise and they don't know how they got the bruise. So these are really good indications of the spleen chi being weak. So I'd be looking for those. So if you sat with me in clinic and the patient mentioned one or two of these, you would see me ask these questions about if they have these other. And what I'm trying to do is build my case that this is existing. So in the course, we look at cases and we apply it. Does this person have this? Oh, yes, they have X, Y, and Z. So that means they do have it, etc. So now we can look at the spleen, and the spleen, like I say, we can't go super deep into anything today. I just want to my goal is to try to give you this overarching map, introduction to things, which then can later on be used to go deeper by yourself or by taking further courses and understanding this. So similar to the liver qi stagnation, when the spleen qi is shu or deficient or vacuous, then that can lead to other patterns. So once again, you've identified that their spleen is weak. Now, almost all of our patients chronic patients have liver depression qi stagnation, have spleen qi. So we need to look for this. It's almost always there, but we can't assume it. We need to find the evidence for it. Okay, we find the evidence for it that the imbalance exists, then we can treat it. We can't assume but we know that it's so common we need to look for it. So as the picture comes, and you guys will get these, not the videos here, the animation, but you will get the pictures here passed on to you. So here we have spleen qi shu, and we can see how it goes down to liver depression qi stagnation. We see how the spleen being weak, we see this in young children, it leads them to have food stagnation. We know that the spleen is the source of phlegm and dampness. And if there's not enough qi, that can lead to blood stasis, right? If there's not enough qi in the body, it can lead to blood stasis. There's not enough qi, so it's not going to move, and then it can lead to blood stasis. And if there's not enough spleen qi, it can lead to blood deficiency. And blood deficiency can lead to yin deficiency, it leads to deficiency heat. All right, so this is simple, basic TCM, but it's in a map now where it's like, oh, they have spleen qi shu. I'm going to check for X, Y, and Z. Now, I used to do this in my head all the time, and now finally, just recently, in the last several months, I came up with these diagrams and so forth. I used to use Li Dong Yun's Yin Fire diagram that Bob Flaws in his teachings and writings used, the 6 depressions, the theory of similar transformation, but this is my take on it put in into a context of what I see in clinic. On top of these different things kind of put together, melded together after many years. All right, so that's the malnourishment and non-construction. Blood yin deficiency. These are things that, you know, when I was taught these different things, I've listened to these teachings hundreds of times. I put it together now in different teachings, but all of these separate teachings, I listened to hundreds of times. So it's really, you're not going to get all of this the first time. It might resonate with you. You might see your patients in a different light when you see them this afternoon or this evening or tomorrow. To think deeper and to look for more patterns. Basically, that's the first step. And then when you start to identify the patterns, how do you treat it? But you'll need to listen to this over and over, and repetition is a very good thing. So blood and yin deficiency. So we talked about sleep involves the sinking of yang qi of the heart downwards into the interior to be enfolded by yin. And if this heart spirit is not properly nourished, then the person could be unable to sleep or stay asleep for a significant amount of time. So difficulty falling asleep, if you look at different textbook, but once you're asleep, you stay asleep, this can be a sign of blood deficiency. Because they're so multi-patterned, I wouldn't identify it specifically, but that as a general rule, that's what it's thought of. Waking frequently during the night feeling hot with possible sweating is thought of as to be yin deficiency. Zhang Jingye said, sleep is yin and is ruled by spirit. If the spirit is quiet, this leads to sleep. If the spirit is not quiet, there is no sleep. The qi of the outside world is a ruling qi when compared to the guest qi of the body-mind. In Chinese medicine, it is a basic principle that the guest qi tends to transform similar to the host or ruling qi. If there's insufficient yin to hold and enfold the yang qi of the spirit, when the yang qi of the taiyang, or the sun, begins its ascent after midnight, the yang qi of the body may also move upward and outward, thus producing wakefulness when one should still be asleep. This kind of early morning insomnia is mostly due to yin blood vacuity and insufficiency. So it's talking about as the sun's starting to rise, the person might wake at 3 or 4 in the morning and can't get back to sleep. And so the idea here is, well, this could be caused by this yin blood deficiency. In modern medicine, we could think of the cortisol levels rising because they also rise. And that could also be from a modern point of view. From a Chinese medicine point of view, it may be due to this. So for blood deficiency, blood is governed by the heart and it's stored by the liver and produced and managed by the spleen. So blood deficiency is intimately related to these organs, the heart, the liver, and the spleen. The main pathomechanism of blood deficiency is the hypofunctioning of the spleen and stomach, as I mentioned earlier. It may also be caused by excessive loss of blood, or the failure to eliminate stagnant blood and to engender new blood, so blood stasis. To achieve better clinical outcome, it's important to determine and treat whether the patient is presenting with heart or liver blood deficiency or both. So, well, especially when we get into herbal medicine, we need to pick which herbs. Are we going to pick more? If it's more liver blood, then we maybe tend towards that, Dongui Bai Xiao. If it's more heart blood, then maybe we're into Dan Shen or Yu Jiao Tong, or different acupuncture points and different herbs as well. So we need to be very specific about what are the symptoms of heart blood? What are the symptoms of liver blood? So here with heart blood, we have heart palpitations, or something called fearful throbbing, Zhen Chong, which is more severe palpitations, not brought on by emotions, where the heart palpitations are more brought on by emotions. Dizziness, pale face, remember the heart relates to the face, the tongue relates to the heart, the pulse relates to the heart specifically. A fine pulse means a small pulse. If the pulse is fine or small, then in diameter, so to speak, then that means that there's lack of blood or yin in the body. And then also disquieted heart spirits, such as heart vexation, insomnia, profuse dreaming, and forgetfulness. So there's some more notes here that you can read through. And I have, what is heart vexation? It's a subjective feeling of disquietude in the chest, often with a sensation of heat. And this is a common symptom, actually. But you need to know what it is, so that when the patient's describing it, you know that's what they're talking about, basically. From a liver blood point of view, remember, the liver has to do with the eyes, the sinews or the ligaments, tendons, has to do with the nails, it has to do with menstruation. So if liver blood is deficient, then it will show up as these different symptoms: dry eyes, difficulty seeing at night or driving at night is a symptom that's specifically related to liver blood and one you should be asking about. But it could be cramps or twitching of muscles, tingling numbness, soft, easily broken nails, scanty, delayed, or no menstruation. So you need to, don't need to do anything, but I would strongly suggest you can't just say blood deficiency, you should say liver or heart, or liver and heart blood deficiency, because that'll get you a more precise treatment and better results in clinic. So over time, blood deficiency may evolve over due to the aging process, chronic disease, especially depressive heat. Chronic depressive heat might lead to yin deficiency. So if the hearts fail to be nourished, plus if there's a deficiency heat, this can lead to harassing the heart spirit. So this commonly complicates the clinical picture after midlife. So the Neijing says at 40 years, our yin is automatically half. So we're not really looking for patients that are 25 or 28, no matter how much they're overworking or how many recreational drugs they took in their teenage years. We're usually almost never going to see yin deficient signs until later in life. The rate of this transformation of yin is also dependent on how much we stir. This comes from Li Dong Yan and Judan Shi. So basically how active we are physically, verbally, and mentally, emotionally, it can burn down this yin quicker. So basically the more yang function activity, the quicker we consume yin, especially if that's combined with not sleeping, having restful, restorative sleep, or a person that is not sleeping enough. I had recently a person that's around 60 years old. They're a retired nurse. They did shift work for their whole life. They only sleep 4 to 5 hours a night. You know, they smoked for years. So you can see how that could affect their yin of their body. Eventually they'll develop different diseases. In general, the process of life consumes yin. Most people will reduce more qi and blood than we consume until our mid-30s. So during sleep, the surplus of qi and blood is stored as latter heaven essence. And then beginning in the mid-30s or early 40s, the spleen becomes weaker and we begin to make less qi in blood. This starts in women earlier. This is pointed to in the classics where they said the Yang Ming declines around 35. The consequence of this is a person will need to dip into their reserves of former effervescence, and then patients begin to present with yin shu signs and symptoms. You know, so first it's kind of like the spleen gets weak, then they start producing less blood, and then over time the blood deficiency turns into yin deficiency. All yin deficiency is what makes up yin is the question I often ask in class. So blood, body fluid, and essence make up yin. So when we're saying yin deficiency, especially of the kidney, then we're going to see signs of these three things being low. And those usually show up as we start to age, but it is a progression. A person doesn't get yin deficient signs and deficiency heat signs in menopause without first their spleen being weak, leading to blood deficiency that led to yin deficiency that led to deficient heat. So there's actually 4 patterns there, not or more, or up to 8 patterns, 9 patterns, not just one pattern of deficiency of yin. So when we say deficiency of yin, we have to delve into deeper. What's causing the deficiency of yin? You know, did it come from this chronic heat in the body caused by depressive heat? Or did it come from blood deficiency, or a combination of the two? All right, so now we're just going into where can blood deficiency, yin deficiency, deficiency heat, what can it lead to? So blood, the first one is blood deficiency can lead to spleen qi deficiency. So the loss of blood can lead to the spleen being weak. The next one, we're going to see go straight across the liver depression, qi stagnation. Liver's job is to move the qi, but it's yang in function, but it's yin in nature. So it also stores the blood. When it's storing the blood, if there's sufficient blood, then the liver qi is going to move better. If there's lack of blood, then the liver qi is not going to move. This is a treatment principle we use called Rogan, which means to soften or to emolliate the liver. This was used by Li Dongyan and other doctors to add blood nourishers into Chinese herbal formulas because they knew when they would nourish the liver blood, the liver qi would move better. So in the formula Xiao Yao Sun, for instance, Dongui and Bai Xiao are used in this formula to nourish the blood so that the liver qi moves better. So we need to know that when the qi isn't moving well, that's one treatment method that we can use. It's called softening the liver, emolliating the liver. Okay, so we'll just go there. And then if there's not enough blood, that can lead to blood stasis. So there's not enough water in the stream, then the water will become stagnant. The same thing with blood. When there's not enough blood, the blood can become stagnant. So sometimes when we're moving the blood and nourishing the blood at the same time, and blood stasis can lead to blood deficiency as well. And then blood deficiency, yin deficiency can lead to type of heat in the body. Blockage and obstruction. So this, we're talking about phlegm, blood stasis, and food stagnation. I'm just gonna have to skip through here a bit, just keeping an eye on the time. So we talk about the 6 depressions you might have learned in school called the 6 stagnations. And I mentioned them earlier: qi stagnation, blood stasis, damp accumulation, phlegm obstruction, food stagnation, and depressive fire. And basically, they all can lead to each other. That's the theory. And in the course, we go into this more. I don't have time today because I'm just keeping an eye on the clock to go into depth, but you can look into it more yourself or come for further teachings. And so we'll just look at how these are affecting here. So in the center, we have food stagnation, phlegm, damp, and blood stasis. Now, all of these are yin depressions. They're substantial depressions. So food's not moving, phlegm's not moving, dampness not moving, blood stasis not moving. So these can lead to each other, all right? So when Oftentimes, let's say a person has a gynecological problem, let's say they have a mass, and that mass could be due to phlegm not moving, but also blood stasis not moving. So we can see how phlegm and blood stasis are not moving. The person could have food stagnation and the body can't separate the clear and turbid, and that leads to phlegm and dampness. Okay, so many of the herbal formulas are set up this way. For instance, Baohuan, which is our most common formula for food stagnation. Now this formula has the ingredients of Tong for phlegm dampness within the formula. All right, so this points us to the fact that these things can lead to each other. And then if any of these substantial things aren't moving, they can block the chi. So if blood isn't moving, it can block the chi. Phlegm can not moving, it can block the chi. So for instance, we might have a lot of phlegm in our chest due to a cold, and we're feeling chest oppression or tightness in the chest. That sign of chest oppression, tightness in the chest, is due to chi not moving, but it's caused by the phlegm. So we can see this. So it's a quick explanation. And you're going to be provided more notes, and we'll delve into this deeper. But we know the relationship between chi and blood. When the chi moves, the blood moves. When the blood moves, the chi moves. So when a person has blood stasis, and that's the longer a person has blood stasis, chi stagnation, then they're more likely to develop blood stasis. The most common reason for blood stasis in a chronic condition is prolonged chi stagnation over time. So if a person is coming to you and they've had signs of chi stagnation for 15 years with their menstruation or so forth, then you're going to need to look for blood stasis. So basically, when you have one of the 6 depressions, you want to look for the other 5. So it's a simple map or theory that can help explain what's going on. So when you have one of them, look for the other ones in clinical practice through your questioning and collecting of symptoms. So we see the phlegm dampness, see the squiggly line, but it also can affect the chi stagnation. And we'll learn later about how it can lead to depressive heat. So blood stasis. So what I point you to here is that, like I mentioned, the most common reason is prolonged chi stagnation. But this blood stasis can affect the circulation of blood to the heart, and it can confound the heart spirit. So that can cause spirit disturbance and lead to insomnia. And it also, the lack of blood flow can lead to malnourishment. This is blood stasis is underdiagnosed in our patient population. We need to look for it. I look for it in every patient. Especially the skin is a good way to look for it. Now, what I've done here in your notes, this comes from the Clinical Handbook of Internal Medicine. The earlier versions, they had this chart of different things to look for blood stasis. And, you have your fixed, sharp, stabbing pain, worse with pressure, fixed, painful, irregular, or hard masses and lumps, dark skin, purplish, the tongue, etc. But they have some really they have it all put into a chart. So you can start to look. I have this patient with long-term chi stagnation. I'm not getting results in clinic. Then I would look to blood stasis. So it could be different pigmentation problems, liver spots, broken blood vessels, petechia, cherry hemangiomas. These are all things you could look for on the skin when you're doing acupuncture. Here in the notes, they talk about left iliac fossa pressure pain in the lower left quadrant. If there's pain in there, it's an indication of blood stasis, which I never read anywhere else before here. And so that's an interesting thing to look for. Of course, looking at the tongue, hypoglossal veins. So they have primary features and secondary. Also, choppy pulse is quite common. We talk about that in the course more, how to be able to identify that. But looking for signs of blood stasis, I really encourage you to with your patients. So what I would do is every patient that comes in, let's say you're seeing 15, 20 patients this week, look for blood stasis in every patient. And I would guarantee you that in these chronic patients, you're going to find a higher proportion than you think is very common. The more I practice, the more I treat blood stasis, actually. And sometimes it's like I have this patient with chronic edema. She's not that old, around 35. And it wasn't until I started adding blood stasis herbs that things substantially improved. So there's all sorts, these charts. That's where it comes from. So use it as a resource. So phlegm, so this is common in our patients, and it's often caused by heat stewing or thickening the juices, often a depressive heat, or splenchy being weak, not able to transform the fluids, or chi stagnation, failure to move the fluids, or overconsumption of damp phlegm-producing foods. So once this is formed, it can block the orifices of the body, including the heart and sensory organs, and it can lead to different mental emotional problems. Often in clinic, in insomnia specifically, it will combine with some element of heat in the body. So we'll have heat and phlegm, and that's what causes the difficulty sleeping. Food stagnation is another thing to look for in clinic. I do want to spend about 10 minutes here talking and then going to questions about harassment by heat evils. I'll kind of jump right in here. There's different types from COVID insomnia. We're looking at a depressive heat, a phlegm heat, or a deficiency heat. According to Lu Wansu's theory of similar transformation, the body's host or ruling qi is yang and therefore warm. If the qi becomes stagnant and accumulates, it may transform into heat. So this is like my 30-second version of this theory, but basically the body is warm. So if something stops moving in the body, then it can accumulate heat. So if phlegm is accumulated in the body over a period of time, the longer or more chronic it becomes, it's more likely to become phlegm heat. If there's dampness over a period of time, it's more likely to transform to damp heat. If there's blood stasis, it's more likely to transform into blood stasis and heat. It's because the body is warm inside. So the longer it's in there, the more likely we'll have heat. That's why majority of patients don't present as cold in our clinic, but they have some element of heat. They could be deficient in cold in some ways, but they have an element of heat. And it's based on Lu Wansu's theory of similar transformation, also Li Dongyun's 6 depressions, and also Yin fire. So this explains the type of heat. Now it depends on how old they are, the sex, the constitution, the diet, how quickly they'll transform into heat, but the longer it's in the system, then the more likely it is to transform into heat. So how does that show up in clinic? Well, it means that phlegm stagnation can be phlegm stagnation in heat, phlegm damp can turn to phlegm damp in heat, and blood stasis can turn to blood stasis in heat. So heat can be added as an element to these things. And then of course, qi stagnation over a period of time can lead to depressive heat or this stagnant heat due to the liver as well. So those are the 5 things. It's the most common type of heat and least discussed. And there's specific herbs and treatment protocols to address this type of heat. I have not come across it in textbooks and teachings. It's more through my clinical experience. I'm like, almost all my patients have some form of depressive heat, and how do we treat it? There's a subtype, especially in skin problems, you'll see a blood heat or menstrual problems. And so this is a subtype, I would argue, of of depressive heat called blood heat, which is more of a dry type of heat. This is also discussed in the course in detail and how to treat it. All right, so emotions are deleterious to health only when excessive and prolonged. So all emotions are normal, but when they're excessive and prolonged, they can cause imbalance. And when excessive, all 7 emotions may transform into fire. So this is talking about this qi not moving, and then that buildup of qi causing a heat in the system. So depressive heat. So this is this qi stagnation due to emotions, leading to a type of heat. So this is the most common type of heat we see in clinic. So it's a high rate of occurrence in clinical practice, especially COVID Somnia. You first need to know how to identify it and then to effectively treat it. So it's when heat in the body is generated, it typically moves upwards in the body, so up to the heart, the lungs, the head, the mouth, the nose, and the eyes and ears. If there's symptoms of liver and kidney yin shu or deficiency, then we call this liver yang rising. If it manifests as replete or excess heat patterns, this is referred to as liver fire flaring upwards. So if the heat fire harasses the heart spirit, so this heat is built in the body. So many of us had a stress in our life. I know I have. And then that stress has led to us unable to sleep at night. So the mechanism, the basic mechanism is the chi stagnates first. It causes this heat. And then this heat goes upwards and it affects the heart. So we might not be able to get to sleep because things are on our mind's racing. We might wake up and can't get back to sleep, difficulty, profuse dreams or nightmares, all caused by this heat. So often in clinic, you'll see in the textbooks, they'll talk about heart fire, liver fire, but where does that fire come from? The fire is not caused by eating too much spicy food. It's coming from emotions. And so what's the mechanism? The mechanism is the chi's not moving, and that's building up the heat in the body. Similar to a bike tire. If you pumped up the bike tire with air, as the pressure built, the tire would become hot. And if you keep pumping in the air, you would blow up the tire, so to speak. It would explode. So this increasing pressure in the body leads to a heat being produced in the body. That heat goes upwards in the body. So you could say, well, I'm going to use herbs or acupuncture points to clear heart fire. But if you don't understand that the chi stagnation is what's causing the fire, then your results aren't going to be as good. They might feel better when the fire goes down, but you'll never get to the underlying mechanism. And then if you understand chi stagnation is part of the underlying mechanism, then you can say, oh, you need to relax, you need to exercise, you need to find joy in your life to move this chi, because that's the underlying mechanism of the imbalance, which is causing the insomnia. You follow? So that's getting to the root, not just being able to say, oh, they have heart fire, they're having trouble sleeping, I'm going to clear heart fire. It's simple. It's keeping it too simple, and you won't get as long-lasting results. So how do we know that there's depressive heat in the liver? Well, instead of irritability, you have irascibility. So explosive, violent outbursts of anger, cursing, shouting, physically destroying things. So it's more extreme. You could be rash, impatient, impetuosity. So, it's the person that would be like, oh, I met this person, let's get married next week. Like that type of behavior, or I need to buy this and buy it right away, They could have heart vexation. So they're going to have chi stagnation symptoms we talked about earlier, but they're more severe. Breast distension, more prominent pain or hypersensitivity, especially of the nipple. Early and excessive menstruation, because now this chi has become stagnant. It's creating a heat, and that heat's causing the menstruation to be early because it's speeding it up, or more profuse. They could have a bitter taste in the mouth, especially in the morning. Red tongue. So oftentimes we'll see patients with a pale tongue with red marks on the sides and the tip. Well, this is depressive heat often showing up here. Not only will the pulse be wiry, but it could be rapid as well. And one thing to look for and ask about in clinic, do you become flushed easily? So it could be when they get nervous, they get really red in the face, or with alcohol or with exercise. And the reason it's with alcohol or exercise is because alcohol and exercise moves the chi, but it doesn't do anything for the heat. So it moves the chi, and then this heat goes up. So it could be people that get like migraines with alcohol or headaches with exercise. It's because they move the chi. So you have this buildup of the pressure in the tire, and you move the chi, but that heat is not released from the body, and it goes upwards in the body and causes these symptoms. So these are all things to look for in clinical practice. This is very, very common, so I look for it in most patients. And if you look in the right place and know what to look for, you'll find it, and then you know you need to address it. If the heat rises upwards in the body, so it could go up to the heart, which is above the liver and cause insomnia, profuse dreams, heart palpitations, mental restlessness, anxiety, and classic symptoms of the heart or going from the heart, bladder, small intestine, like painful urination, sores on the tip of the tongue, etc. If it rises to the head, it can be various skin problems, acne, rosacea, seborrheic dermatitis, perioral dermatitis, dry mouth, oral thirst, red eyes because of the liver, of course, tinnitus, headaches. And then we have blood heat, which I would say is it's a very common cause of skin problems, mental emotional diseases, and bleeding diseases, but it's a subtype of depressive heat, I would say. So we're going to open it up for questions, but as we watch here, we talked about modern way of living, liver spleen disharmony, liver depression, Qi stagnation, that and spleen Qi deficiency, and how that can lead to 6 depressions. And similar transformation, how heat can accumulate when things aren't moving, it can lead to heat, and Yin fire theory, which is a lot of what this is about. We talked about this model of liver spleen disharmony, like the 4 main mechanisms of COVID Somnia. Liver spleen disharmony, malnourishment and non-construction. We talked about the harassment of heat evils. And we talked about obstruction. We talked about the 6 depressions. My video stopped here. It's not showing me the window here, but we'll trust that it'll keep going. So yes, any questions? Yes, it's a lot to take in. I've just given you a big download of information, that's for sure, Diane. See if this video keeps going here. So when we get to the end, we have this is your map. This is how all of this relates to each other and how it all connects. There's all different colors. So you could use this as your mapping clinic. So, oh, I see patient has liver depression, Qi stagnation. Look where all the green lines connect. Check for these other patterns. Then when you find one of the other patterns, it's kind of like this trail leads to this trail leads to this trail. But when you follow all the trails then you can get to your destination. If you only go down one trail, you're not going to get to your destination, in my opinion. And once again, this is like the elephant in the dark. This is my opinion. This is my experience. This is me traveling for many years, having guides that have traveled, them getting me to a certain point, me going further, and eventually you go to a point where no one else is guiding you. You have to come up with your own map. Now I'm coming back from that spot and saying, here's a map that I got this far, but I want you to go further. That's yeah, it's very practical. This is not esoteric or theoretical. This is information, and this is stuff that I introduce to students in school, but most people, they won't have it. But that's the great part of it too, because sometimes, and what it does for me is frustration in life leads us to look for more answers. If everything was so easy, we don't have stress, we don't look for more answers. But when we don't get results, we go deeper in our own personal journeys to look for more answers. So it's the frustration of having the basic knowledge taught in school, and we get out and it doesn't match our patients. So what some people do in Chinese medicine is they then look for other modalities or other ways of treating to add to Chinese medicine. Instead of going deeper in Chinese medicine to look for the answers, they start to add to Chinese medicine. So go to a superficial level in Chinese medicine, and then they'll add in nutrition and naturopathy and muscle testing and all different things instead of going deeper within Chinese medicine. The theories are there in Chinese medicine. You just have to go deeper. You got to dig deeper, and don't peel an onion. Don't do it how a textbook that they use in school will say it's this pattern or that pattern. I, being a person that's journeyed for a while, is telling you you're going to see these 4 to 8 patterns simultaneously in clinical practice. As other teachers have taught me that, they gave me this vision that this was the way it was, not how you've been taught it up to this point. And for some of you, this will be life-changing in your practice, as it was for me, because it's like, oh, this person sees what I see. This is what I've seen in clinic. This is what I've always witnessed in clinic, but no one has ever said it to me. That's what it did for me. So hopefully for some of you. No problem. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, Vina. It really, and then the art becomes, and the fun of it becomes problem solving and putting it into practice and see what works. And I'm hoping to attract people by these teachings, for people that resonate with it, so that we can then create a group of people that are learning and working together to look at it from this more complex point of view, and to share what I've learned, but also to listen to others and try to build a group of people that are interested in going deeper instead of this very superficial way, and keep and really dumbing down Chinese medicine in a lot of ways. I think we've done that with how things are translated, by dropping out words, by using words such as tonification instead of looking at the subtleties, like the word fortify or boost is different than tonify. So we kind of dumbed down things to make it easier to learn, but in doing so, we've lost the depth of Chinese medicine. And so hopefully we can gain that back. Yeah, we could open up if someone wanted to verbally ask a question. I'm happy to take questions for another 10 minutes or so. And it's okay that you've never heard of this or you never treated in this way before, because you didn't know differently. And all of the stuff that you learned before is useful, because like I said, it could have led you to frustration or lack of results. And now you change how you approach things and you get results. So then you realize, oh, that gives you encouragement, as it has for me. Introduced to these ideas, you apply them. Oh, they work in clinic. Okay, that'll encourage me to use it more. And then it becomes this exploratory way of learning and helping people. And you can help people very quickly if you're getting the right dose, and can really change lives in a very deep way, and help people get into balance at such a state that they don't need to, they come to you for 3 to 6 months, not for 10 years.
Rob, can I ask a question? When
Sure.
you're talking about a number of patterns, is there a particular process that you would go through to say, I'm going to start with this one or that one, rather than I'm kind of like looking at your map thinking, well, where would I start?
Yeah, so are you saying, how do you decide which is the main pattern of the group of patterns?
It's a sense about sort of, is there a pattern in there? Is there something in there that technically could be the cause and everything else comes from it?
Sure.
Outside in, it's whether we look inside out.
Yeah, so the crux of modern disease and chronic disease is the liver and the spleen, I would say. So that's the underlying mechanism, is the liver qi not moving and the spleen being weak. which proportion, it depends on the patient. So, you know, they could be, their spleen could have been weak ever since they were a child, and you go through the history, yeah, you know, to, you know, you look for the history of the patient. So it could have been the liver cheese, you know, started first, or the spleen cheese. So for instance, let me give you an example. A person could have had depression ever since a female, ever since they started menstruating. So you could look at the mechanism. Well, what happened? Why did they start getting depression when they were, you know, 13 and they started menstruating? Well, you know, that caused their spleen to be weak, and then they didn't make as much blood, and then they started to show up with, later on, they started to show up with PMS signs. So you can start to see that there could be 3 patterns right there. So you could look at the history of how it started. You could look at, but they have to have whatever patterns you're treating, they have to have currently. You've got to find the evidence. And then you would proportion based on the number of symptoms. So they could have, so let me give you an example. You could have one person that has liver spleen symptoms. You have 2 people, let's say. And the one person, their tongue and their pulse show more liver depression, cheese stagnation. They have very wiry pulse, and maybe they have red spots on their tongue, or it's a little bit darker of the tongue. And then another person has the same symptoms, except their pulse is very weak, very thin, right? And their tongue is pale and swollen with teeth marks. So they both have liver spleen, but I would say it's more spleen in this person and it's more liver. So that would give me a proportion based on the tongue and the pulse, and the number of symptoms will tell me which one is more predominant. Then you get a working theory. Then you put the theory into practice. And then once you start to practice, you could say, no, I thought it was 35% the spleen and 25% the liver, but when you start to treat, it's actually 35% the liver, 25% the spleen. So you have to adjust as needed as you're going through treatment. But in the beginning, and that's the art of it, and that's why it's good to have a mentor, is they can help you adjust and help identify what is more predominant. Does that make sense? So you have to look at, you know, kind of what the history is, how they're currently presenting, but they could have been more liver depression, cheese stagnation in their 20s, but now they're 44 when you're seeing them, and they're presenting more with the deficiency. Not that excess cheese stagnation went away, it's still there, but over time it's wore down the body, so the body's weaker. So at this stage, depending how they're presenting, you might focus on the deficiency more. But don't forget that other thing didn't go away. It's just not as much. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does, because I was trained sort of 5 elements, so it's slightly different way of working, but at the same time, it's how you actually start to layer in the various things that are happening. So that's really helpful. And like everything, it's always been prepared to make some mistakes along the way about hypothesis. So
yeah, I wouldn't say I wouldn't call it a mistake. So for instance, I say this to my patients. I say it's kind of like you have this target, like archery target, bullseye. And I've been practicing long enough that I'm not off the target, right? I'm still on the target, but I might not be a bullseye right away. Sometimes I get close to the bullseye right away, but I'm on the target. Yeah. I did many years where sometimes I was totally off the target. So I wouldn't say it's a mistake, but what you do is you fine tune the formula and the treatment as time goes on, and you get closer to the bullseye, but that takes time. It's kind of like when you're skipping, you know, 2 people are holding the rope and skipping, and you got to jump in to the rhythm of the skipping. Now, you know, the more you skip, the more you get the rhythm to know how quickly to jump. And so that comes with clinical experience, but I wouldn't say it's a mistake. It's like Edison, they said, well, you failed 100 times to make the light bulb. And his response was, I didn't fail. I learned 100 ways to not invent a light bulb. Yeah. So it's not a failing or a faltering. And if you follow the symptoms, you won't go off the bullseye. Yeah. If we start to get into intuition and theory and making assumptions, this is what the human being does, as well as myself. We mix modern medicine with Chinese medicine. then we get off the target because we're not following the symptoms. If you follow the symptoms, it'll lead you to the right diagnosis. If you don't follow the symptoms, you make assumptions, your thinking isn't clear, then you're going to get off the board. So I really get into follow these, like blood stasis. Is there blood stasis? How do you know it? Don't assume based on a medical test, find the clinical symptoms, right? And then you will not be off the board. So that's what I teach, you know, it's about how to stay on the board and then how to get closer to a bullseye quicker. What common patterns to look for.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, so please join, you know, we just go deeper. We start to apply it to cases. You bring in cases into the course. We analyze them and go through them so you can practically put this in and you can get support for patients that are difficult to treat currently in your practice, and you can help your practice grow and thrive through learning more, basically, on a very practical level. Yeah, you're most welcome, Linda. Yeah, you won't look at patients the same way when you're introduced to this information. I hope you don't. Yeah. Yeah, take it away. Get a hold of me. Put it into practice. There's a saying here. This is what I'll leave you guys with here as we finish up. You're welcome, Hui. Good to see you again, or have you here. It's by Buddha, supposedly. It says, do not believe what you have heard. Do not believe in tradition because it is handed down many generations. Do not believe in anything that has been spoken of many times. Do not believe because the written statements came from some old sage. Do not believe in conjecture. Do not believe in authority or teachers or elders. But after careful observation and analysis, when it agrees with reason and it will benefit one and all, then accept it and live by it. So hopefully today, you don't believe what I say. Don't, because you heard it here or my experience. Take it away, put it into practice like I have. And if it works for you and it's helping your patients, when it agrees with reason and it will benefit one and all, then accept it and live by it and share it with others. So that's what I'm saying. Don't believe me. Just maybe look at things a little bit differently. Take it away, put it into practice. And if it's helpful for you, then continue to use it as I have over the last 20 some years and see what happens. Let me know. If it doesn't work, let me know. If it works, let me know. And I bet you'll be surprised.